Thank you. Before we get started with today's program, I want to take a minute and answer a question that a lot of people ask me when I come in or ask me when I am talking to them about what I do with my life. People are curious about how I became a public speaker, and most of them have a secret desire to become one. And then some people ask me, why did you become a public speaker? And often that's because they're terrified or horrified at what I do. Okay. Hate that. Let's get to the point. Thank you. Before we get started with today's program, I'm going to take a minute and answer a question that I get asked on my way in, or often when I tell people what it is that I do. And it's the curious question of, how did you become a public speaker? And most of those people want to know because they'd like to become one themselves. And then I also get asked, why did you become a public speaker? And those people are typically terrified of being on stage or talking in front of a group of people. And I had heard that the fear of speaking in public was actually rated higher than the fear of dying, which I found astounding. And somewhere in the last year, I realized that my greatest fear was that I would actually die before I became a public speaker. So I started to take steps forward towards the thing that I'd always been very, very passionate about. And sure enough, I started to bang into myself or my fear along the way. And it took me a while to sort this out, and I got the help of my teenage daughter when she came home from a driving lesson. So she's 16. She had just gotten her G1, she'd done her classroom work, and she had just gone out for her 2-hour first road test or road lesson with her instructor. And she came back and we were asking her about it, and she said, Mom, the most important thing I learned was where the blind spot is. And I thought, okay. She said, well, he taught me about it in class, and you and Dad talk about it when we're driving, but no one had ever shown me where the blind spot is. And she said, prior to that, I had been looking over my shoulder too far, which of course we all know means that she's taking the car with her. And certainly if you're looking over your shoulder, you are not going forward to your destination, and you're certainly not going to get there safely. So we had this really interesting discussion about that, and I started to think about, okay, what's my blind spot? And sure enough, in the next couple of days, I realized exactly where my blind spot is. And it started about 17 years ago. I was sitting in the office of the president of the company that I worked for. It's a very big company now. And we were having the kind of discussion that someone who is on a fast track and has career aspirations is really hoping to have when they're in their early 30s. And that is a conversation about me someday sitting at the desk that he was sitting at. In other words, we were talking about, how do I get to be the president of that organization? So needless to say, that's a pretty happy day for me. It's a Wednesday, it's bright and sunny, it's in June. I'm totally, stoked about going home and telling my husband about this great day that I've had. Little did I know that on the other side of the country, same Wednesday, same bright sunny day, my sister, the doctor, was driving from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Truro, Nova Scotia to deliver a baby. And when I walked in the door of my home and saw my 10-and-a-half-month-old son and the nanny. I saw my husband, and he said, "Adwynna, I need to talk to you." And you know it's not going to be good news. So what he ended up having to tell me was that my sister had gone off the highway and hit a culvert and flipped her vehicle, and the ambulance and jaws of life had come to get her out of the car and taken her to the very hospital where she was supposed to be delivering a baby, and they were unable to resuscitate her, and because she was 7.5 months pregnant at the time, they were also unable to save her baby. So the story of how I dealt with the grief of losing that is a completely different story. And I've done a lot of amazing work, and it changed my life, and I left corporate life and so on. So the interesting thing is 17 years later, what I remembered and the pieces that I was putting together was the following: that I had equated me stepping forward and becoming what I wanted to be with someone that I loved very much dying. That was my blind spot, and that was the piece of my life that a shoulder check did not allow me to see. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about how to find your blind spot, what you can do about it, and taking that step forward in your life without banging into yourself. My name is Adwynna MacKenzie. I'm the president of Small Changes.